Hi, good afternoon. I'm going to talk about the Julio-Claudian dynasty as part of my presentation for my History 101 class. I'm really excited to talk about the Roman Empire and something that I have always been fascinated by, and I got to read it for my class, so that was pretty cool. So, a little bit of a background about the Roman Empire itself. So the empire itself, it started as a small city kingdom in Rome, and then expanded it towards to become a republic, and then took over Italian peninsula, and further expanded through rest of the Mediterranean as it became an empire itself, and it went through the dynasties of several emperors. However, the most notable one was Julio-Claudian dynasty, as they were the ones who established the first imperial rule in the Roman Empire. So, without further ado, let's go over the map itself to provide a reference of how big the Roman Empire was. So, this is the map of Roman Empire under Marcus Aurelius at its peak in 117 AD. It was one of the largest during that time of the world. It was known as Rome, was called the light of the civilization. There were several inventions and new things that kept coming up as a technology and discovery that the Romans did, which was kind of way ahead of their time as compared to the civilizations in that time frame. So the empire after the peak, of course, started declining, and then eventually it got divided into two major portions: the east and the west. In the year 395 AD, the Western Roman Empire fell in next 200 years, whereas the eastern part continued to be known as the Byzantine Empire, ruled from Constantinople, which is still a city in Turkey. It's called Istanbul, and really the empire reestablished the Eastern Empire, went ahead, reestablished the old Roman Empire under Emperor Justinian, but it contracted after the plague and the contraction of the economy. Regardless, the empire itself lasted till 1453 and fell to the Ottomans after the siege of Constantinople itself. So, the research itself, I was fascinated by the Julio-Claudian dynasty. I went through Gale research data sources. I read through some biographies from the original authors who talked about the life of the great emperors. I was a big history geek as a kid, so I watched documentaries on Augustus or Octavian. I watched documentary on Nero. However, I was not so much aware of the lifestyle of Tiberius, which is not so famous at, for his accomplishment and Claudius. However, we all heard of Nero, and we all heard of Caligula and Octavian as Augustus. So the research itself, I would say the most important part of the dynasty was the foundation itself that was laid out by Julius Caesar, who became the first dictator of Rome after putting an end to a civil war. However, he was assassinated by the senators in a very gory way, and Octavian, his nephew, inherited his property and his rights. So he grew his power base on the basis of some sympathies and inheritance. Then eventually formed an alliance and kept increasing his influence until a point where he became powerful enough to challenge his own partners like Mark Antony, defeated them, and then took over the Rome for himself. And that's how Augustus came to be known as the first emperor. Octavian was the Augustus. As we know, the month itself is named after him, and the institutions he established still survive today. So I did a lot of research on what Augustus did. He really established the importance of the family itself in the Roman society. He expanded on the empire, strengthened it, put uniform taxation, laws and order, and the road network that Rome is famous for, and the sayings, road leads to Rome. Really, it started on a large scale by Augustus, and then Tiberius, when he handed off the reign, Tiberius continued to do what Augustus did, and but he focused within the boundaries of the current empire. He didn't focus on military campaign to expand it further. Caligula, however, was more of self. I should say he poured more attention into making himself famous, and spent a lot of money in the games and antagonized population while he emptied out the treasury, and he started taxing people more. So naturally, people turned against him. Then, after Caligula, his uncle Claudius actually brought the empire back to the Augustus days. He was an efficient administrator. He expanded on the empire boundaries and really brought the empire back to prosperity. And again, the cycle of emptying out the treasury started by Nero, as he's famous for. Sometimes it's speculated he started the fire in Rome, but that's not a true fact, or there's no solid evidence to say that. However, Nero tried his best after Rome was burned to rebuild it, and the amount of money he spent on that kind of, or the nobility, especially after he constrained the nobility to pay for these new constructions and seize their lands. So it ultimately led to a civil strife, and he was forced to commit suicide. So that brought an end to the Augustus dynasty. However, I read a lot about the institutions, the systems that Augustus started continued even in future Roman dynasties, and people even after 500, 600 years after the Augustinian dynasty still look towards it as a role model of how to rule an empire within the Roman Empire. Since the empire lasted for 2 millennia, the legacy left by Augustus and his post-successors still continued. So that was a little bit of a research around this. I really enjoyed reading about the discoveries and inventions that were done during this part, and there's a lot of busts and images of Augustus and his successors, and even in today's world, like there's like a lot of history written on Julius Caesar himself. So can't really miss them in history. Now I'll go over some of the artifacts that I thought would be important to portray, and I did a good blend of imperial art versus a common folk art. So this painting is mainly from the villa of imperial villa, so it shows kind of a ceremonial take on it, and it also has some of the, I would say, the art at that time. It shows that. So it's a wall painting that creates that. And the next one is a terracotta ball. It's used in a daily purpose. I would say it's used by common people, plebeians. It shows dancers and musicians, and shows the importance of art in the empire even in the days of Augustinian rule. And it shows how people valued art even on the common bowls and stuff they used. Next one, it kind of, I chose this because it shows the mobility within the Roman society. So this funerary altar was created by someone who was a slave, probably a slave in his previous life, became prosperous as a freedman, and then erected this one. So it really shows that even in those times, mobility was possible in Roman Empire, from being a slave at the lowest level of the society to coming to someone who is well thought of within the empire, and someone who raised his social status and said, okay, I can free more slaves as well, and commemorate about it. So I thought that was cool. The last one, it talks about the mixing of Greek influence into Roman art. So it's like really a Hellenistic artist that's showing a woman who is going for a festival, and you can see from her basket, which looks kind of full. So it's like not a common woman is proud. She's really from a nobility. So it shows the influence of Greek art, at the same time the Roman influence on the Greek art, as they develop new styles by merging the best of two. So last but not the least slide is talking about the sources used for the images, and that is it for the presentation. I really enjoyed talking about the topic. This is picture of Palatine Hill. It's magnificent when you visit in person to see all the ruins that are out there, even the structures that still stand there, like the Pantheon, and you can see a lot of material that was taken away from the old structures. You can still see in the Vatican. So if you ever get a chance, do visit modern day Rome, and you can still feel the legacy left out by the ancient Roman Empire over there.